Jimmy Cliff challenged Stevie Wonder to a musical duel. What happened next made history. It was June 21, 1974, at the Motown recording studios in Detroit, Michigan, where the legendary Hitsville, USA, had produced some of the most influential soul music in history. Jimmy Cliff was in Detroit to record with some of Motown's legendary session musicians, hoping to create a crossover album that would introduce reggae consciousness to American soul music audiences. What he didn't expect was to find himself in the middle of a musical confrontation that would become one of the most legendary performance battles in music history. The occasion was a private industry gathering celebrating Motown's 15th anniversary, where the label's biggest stars had gathered to perform for an intimate audience of 200 music industry insiders, fellow artists, and influential media figures. Stevie Wonder, who was at the absolute peak of his creative and commercial power following the massive success of Innervisions and Fulfillingness' first finale, was scheduled to perform a solo piano set, showcasing his musical genius and innovative harmonic concepts. Jimmy had been invited to this exclusive gathering as part of Motown's efforts to expand into international music markets and demonstrate their respect for world music traditions that had influenced American soul and R&B. Berry Gordy himself had specifically requested Jimmy's presence, understanding that reggae's growing global influence represented an important musical movement that Motown should acknowledge and potentially collaborate with. As the evening progressed, the intimate venue buzzed with the kind of musical energy that only occurred when the world's most talented artists gathered in the same room. Diana Ross had performed an impromptu version of Love Hangover. Marvin Gaye had delivered a stunning rendition of What's Going On, and the Four Tops had brought down the house with their signature harmonies and choreography. But it was when Stevie Wonder took the stage that the evening reached its musical peak. Seated at a grand piano in the center of Motown Studio A, Stevie began performing an extended medley of his greatest compositions, demonstrating the harmonic sophistication and rhythmic innovation that had made him one of the most respected musicians in popular music. Jimmy watched from the audience with growing admiration for Stevie's technical mastery and musical intelligence, but also with increasing awareness that Stevie's most innovative rhythmic concepts showed clear Caribbean influences that were never acknowledged or credited. Songs like Master Blaster and Boogie on Reggae Woman incorporated reggae rhythmic patterns, but Stevie was receiving all the recognition for innovations that had originally been developed by Jamaican musicians. What transformed the evening from a celebration into a legendary confrontation was Stevie's decision to perform an extended piano arrangement of Bob Marley's No Woman No Cry, reimagined through Stevie's sophisticated jazz harmonies and complex rhythmic variations. While Stevie's arrangement was undeniably brilliant, Jimmy felt that the performance represented exactly the kind of musical appropriation that prevented reggae artists from receiving appropriate recognition for their cultural innovations. As Stevie concluded his virtuosic interpretation of No Woman No Cry to thunderous applause from the audience, Jimmy made a decision that would create one of the most talked-about moments in Motown history. Instead of simply enjoying the performance or offering private feedback later, Jimmy stood up from his seat and called out to Stevie in a voice that carried clearly through the intimate studio space. "Stevie, that was beautiful, man. But I think the audience should hear what that song sounds like when it comes from the culture that created it," Jimmy announced, his Jamaican accent adding authenticity to his bold challenge. The studio fell completely silent as 200 of the music industry's most influential figures realized that Jimmy Cliff had just publicly challenged Stevie Wonder to what amounted to a musical duel in the heart of Motown's sacred creative space. Stevie, who had been basking in the audience's appreciation for his complex arrangement, turned toward Jimmy's voice with obvious surprise. While Stevie couldn't see Jimmy due to his blindness, his acute hearing and musical instincts told him immediately that this challenge was coming from someone with serious musical authority and cultural credibility. Jimmy Cliff Stevie responded, his voice carrying both respect and curiosity. "I'd be honored to hear your interpretation. This is your musical tradition, and I have enormous respect for what you and Bob Marley have created." What happened next would be studied by musicians and music historians for decades as one of the greatest examples of how musical traditions could engage in respectful competition that elevated rather than diminished both approaches. Jimmy walked to the stage area where a second piano had been positioned, understanding that he was about to engage in musical dialogue with one of the most gifted musicians who had ever lived. But instead of being intimidated by Stevie's obvious technical superiority, Jimmy felt confident that his cultural authenticity and spiritual connection to reggae music would provide its own form of musical power. "Let's start with No Woman No Cry and see what happens when we approach it from different musical perspectives," Jimmy suggested, settling at his piano with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years developing his understanding of both reggae consciousness and international musical collaboration. What followed was 25 minutes of musical dialogue that demonstrated how different cultural approaches to the same material could enhance rather than compete with each other. Jimmy began with a performance of No Woman No Cry that was stripped down to its essential spiritual message, using simple chord progressions and authentic reggae phrasing to convey the song's themes of hope and perseverance through struggle. The contrast between Jimmy's approach and Stevie's earlier interpretation was immediately apparent to everyone in Studio A. Where Stevie had focused on harmonic complexity and technical virtuosity, Jimmy emphasized emotional directness and spiritual authenticity. His version carried the weight of lived experience and cultural wisdom that no amount of technical skill could replicate. Jimmy's performance was raw, honest, and spiritually powerful in ways that made the audience understand why Bob Marley's original composition had become an anthem of hope for oppressed people worldwide. His voice carried the pain and hope of Caribbean struggle, while his piano playing provided simple but profound harmonic support that served the song's message rather than showcasing individual brilliance. Stevie listened intently to Jimmy's interpretation, his acute musical hearing processing not just the notes and rhythms, but the cultural context and spiritual energy that Jimmy brought to the material. As someone who had spent his career exploring the spiritual dimensions of music, Stevie recognized immediately that Jimmy possessed something that couldn't be taught or imitated: authentic connection to the cultural tradition that had created the song. When Jimmy concluded his version of No Woman No Cry, Stevie responded, not with defensiveness or competition, but with genuine curiosity and respect for what he had just heard. "Jimmy, you've shown me something I missed completely in my arrangement," Stevie said, his voice carrying obvious humility and eagerness to learn. "I was so focused on harmonic possibilities that I lost touch with the spiritual foundation that gives the song its real power. Can you teach me how to approach Caribbean music with that kind of cultural authenticity?" This response transformed what could have been a competitive confrontation into a collaborative learning experience that would benefit both artists and everyone witnessing their exchange. Stevie responded with his complex harmonic arrangement of No Woman No Cry, but this time he incorporated some of the rhythmic phrasing and spiritual directness that Jimmy's performance had demonstrated. The result was a version that maintained Stevie's sophisticated musical concepts while honoring the Caribbean cultural context that gave the song its authentic power. The audience watched in amazement as Stevie's technical mastery began serving spiritual expression rather than simply showcasing individual brilliance. His complex harmonic concepts became vehicles for consciousness raising rather than displays of musical sophistication, demonstrating how technical excellence could serve cultural authenticity when approached with proper understanding and respect. The musical conversation continued through several songs, with Jimmy and Stevie taking turns leading and supporting each other through reggae classics, Stevie Wonder compositions, and spontaneous musical improvisations that drew from both Caribbean and American musical traditions. During their exploration of Stevie's higher ground, the collaboration reached new levels of artistic and spiritual integration. Jimmy introduced reggae rhythmic patterns that transformed the song from a funk anthem into a consciousness-raising spiritual meditation, while maintaining the urgency and energy that had made Stevie's original version so compelling. Stevie responded by incorporating some of Jimmy's melodic phrasing and spiritual approach into his keyboard work, creating a fusion that was neither pure American soul nor pure Jamaican reggae, but something entirely new that honored both traditions while pointing toward future possibilities for cross-cultural musical collaboration. The transformation of Higher Ground into a reggae soul fusion demonstrated how different musical traditions could strengthen each other when approached with mutual respect and genuine understanding. Jimmy's Caribbean spiritual consciousness gave new depth to Stevie's social justice themes, while Stevie's harmonic sophistication provided new emotional dimensions to Jimmy's consciousness-raising message. Their collaborative version of Master Blaster, Stevie's tribute to Bob Marley, became the evening's most powerful demonstration of how authentic cultural dialogue could enhance rather than appropriate different musical traditions. Jimmy's guidance helped Stevie perform the song with greater cultural authenticity, while Stevie's musical innovations showed Jimmy new ways to present reggae consciousness to mainstream American audiences. The breakthrough moment came when they performed an impromptu dual piano version of Many Rivers to Cross that allowed both artists to showcase their individual strengths, while demonstrating how different musical traditions could strengthen each other through respectful collaboration. Jimmy's vocals carried the weight of authentic spiritual experience and Caribbean cultural wisdom, expressing the song's themes of struggle and spiritual perseverance with the authority of someone who had lived through similar challenges. His piano playing provided the kind of simple but profound harmonic support that reggae required, creating space for spiritual contemplation rather than musical showmanship. Stevie's contribution was equally powerful, but approached from a completely different musical perspective. His harmonic innovations enhanced Jimmy's spiritual expression without overwhelming it, demonstrating how technical sophistication could serve consciousness-raising purposes when approached with proper understanding and respect. The combination created something that was more spiritually powerful than either artist could have achieved alone. Jimmy's cultural authenticity gave depth and meaning to Stevie's technical innovations, while Stevie's musical mastery provided new ways to express the spiritual truths that Jimmy carried through his Caribbean heritage. As their musical dialogue continued, something remarkable began happening in Studio A. The audience of industry professionals who had come expecting conventional entertainment found themselves witnessing a masterclass in how authentic musical collaboration could transcend cultural boundaries while honoring the traditions that made such collaboration meaningful. Artists like Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, and Smokey Robinson were taking mental notes about how Jimmy and Stevie were incorporating each other's musical concepts without losing their individual cultural identities. They were witnessing firsthand how cross-cultural musical dialogue could expand artistic possibilities for everyone involved when approached with genuine respect and eagerness to learn. Record executives in the audience were realizing that they were witnessing the creation of a new musical possibility that could reach both reggae and soul audiences while maintaining authentic expression for both traditions. The commercial potential was obvious, but more importantly, they were seeing how authentic cultural exchange could create music that served spiritual and social purposes beyond mere entertainment. The climax of the evening came when Jimmy and Stevie performed a dual piano arrangement of Superstition that incorporated reggae's spiritual consciousness into Stevie's funk innovations. Jimmy's interpretation emphasized the song's themes about overcoming mental limitations through spiritual awareness and cultural understanding, while Stevie's keyboard work provided the rhythmic foundation that made these consciousness-raising messages accessible to mainstream audiences. This version of superstition became something entirely new, neither pure Stevie Wonder nor pure Jimmy Cliff, but a fusion that demonstrated how different musical traditions could create something more powerful together than either could achieve alone. The reggae spiritual perspective gave new depth to Stevie's social commentary, while Stevie's musical innovations provided new ways to express Caribbean consciousness-raising concepts. The performance built to a crescendo that had the entire Studio A audience on their feet, not just because of the technical excellence they were witnessing, but because of the spiritual and emotional power that was being generated through this unprecedented musical collaboration. When their musical dialogue finally concluded, the Studio A audience provided a standing ovation that lasted over 15 minutes. People weren't just applauding two great performances. They were celebrating the demonstration that musical excellence could transcend cultural boundaries through respectful collaboration that honored, rather than appropriated, different traditions. Berry Gordy himself, who had built Motown into an empire by recognizing and developing exceptional talent, was visibly moved by what he had witnessed. "In 40 years in the music business," he told the audience, "I've never seen anything like what we just experienced." This is what happens when great artists approach each other's traditions with genuine respect and willingness to learn. Stevie addressed the audience directly, acknowledging what had occurred during their musical exchange, and demonstrating the humility that separated truly great artists from merely technically proficient ones. "Tonight, Jimmy has taught me that technical mastery means nothing without cultural respect and spiritual authenticity," Stevie said, his voice carrying obvious emotion and genuine gratitude for the learning experience he had received. "His willingness to engage in musical dialogue has shown me new ways to approach my own compositions while honoring the traditions that influence all popular music." Stevie continued with specific acknowledgments that demonstrated how much he had learned from their musical exchange. "Jimmy has shown me that reggae music isn't just a rhythmic style that can be borrowed for funk arrangements. It's a complete spiritual and cultural system that deserves the same respect we give to any profound artistic tradition. From now on, whenever I incorporate Caribbean musical elements, I'll make sure to do so with appropriate cultural crediting and collaboration with artists who understand these traditions authentically." Jimmy's response demonstrated the grace and wisdom that had made him reggae's most effective cultural ambassador. Stevie has proven that when musicians approach different traditions with genuine respect and eagerness to learn, musical collaboration can expand everyone's understanding while strengthening rather than diluting the cultural authenticity that gives all music its power. Jimmy's closing remarks addressed the broader implications of their musical dialogue. "Tonight has shown that competition between artists can create understanding instead of conflict, when approached with respect for cultural differences and genuine desire to learn from each other." Stevie's willingness to engage with reggae consciousness has demonstrated how technical excellence can serve spiritual purposes when guided by cultural wisdom. The impact of the Jimmy Cliff-Stevie Wonder musical duel extended far beyond that single evening at Motown Studios. Within weeks, word had spread throughout the music industry about the extraordinary musical dialogue that had occurred between reggae's leading cultural ambassador and soul music's greatest innovative genius. Bootleg recordings of the evening began circulating among musicians, who studied the collaboration as a masterclass in how different musical traditions could engage in respectful, competitive dialogue. Music schools began requesting copies for their cross-cultural programs, understanding they had captured something unprecedented. The collaboration influenced how both artists approached their subsequent work in profound and lasting ways. Stevie began incorporating more explicit references to Caribbean musical traditions in his recordings, always with appropriate cultural crediting and often featuring collaboration with Jamaican musicians. His 1976 album, Songs in the Key of Life, included several tracks that showed clear reggae influences, but presented in ways that honored rather than appropriated Caribbean musical innovations. Most notably, Stevie established a scholarship fund for Caribbean music students to study at American music institutions, ensuring that future generations of reggae artists would have access to technical training. The fund acknowledged the Caribbean musical traditions deserve the same academic respect as European and American musical forms. Jimmy gained new respect within the American music industry as an artist who could engage with any musical tradition while maintaining his cultural authenticity and consciousness-raising mission. The musical dialogue with Stevie had demonstrated that reggae consciousness could enhance rather than conflict with other musical approaches when presented with appropriate confidence and cultural knowledge. Record labels began approaching Jimmy with collaboration opportunities that had never been available to reggae artists before. Major soul and R&B artists started seeking his guidance for incorporating Caribbean elements into their work, understanding that his cultural authority could help them avoid the appropriation issues that had become increasingly problematic in the industry. Most significantly, the Motown musical duel became a model for how artists from different cultural traditions could engage in competitive collaboration that elevated everyone involved, rather than creating winners and losers. The evening had demonstrated that musical competition can serve educational and cultural purposes when approached with mutual respect and genuine desire to learn. Music schools began using recordings of the evening as teaching tools for courses in cross-cultural musical collaboration and respectful artistic dialogue. Business programs started studying the collaboration as an example of how competitive engagement could create value for all participants when guided by cultural respect. Record labels started actively seeking opportunities to create similar cross-cultural musical dialogues, understanding that audiences were hungry for authentic artistic exchange that honored different traditions while creating new musical possibilities. The commercial success of subsequent collaborations proved that authenticity could be more profitable than appropriation. The musical challenge that Jimmy had issued to Stevie Wonder proved that authentic cultural expression could engage with any level of technical sophistication when approached with confidence in the spiritual power of one's own musical tradition. The evening demonstrated that musical excellence took many forms, and that the greatest artists were those capable of learning from traditions different from their own, while maintaining their cultural authenticity. The collaboration also influenced broader conversations about cultural appropriation in popular music. Jimmy and Stevie's respectful engagement became a model for how established artists could approach musical traditions outside their own cultural backgrounds without falling into exploitative patterns. Universities began studying the Motown collaboration as an example of how artistic exchange could serve cultural understanding rather than cultural exploitation. The evening became a case study in how competition and collaboration could coexist when guided by principles of mutual respect. Years later, music historians would cite the Jimmy Cliff-Stevie Wonder musical duel as one of the most important examples of how competitive collaboration between artists from different cultural backgrounds could create musical innovations that honored all participating traditions while expanding artistic possibilities for everyone involved. The challenge that began as Jimmy's response to cultural appropriation had evolved into a demonstration of how musical dialogue could create understanding, respect, and new artistic possibilities that served both individual careers and broader cultural appreciation between different musical communities. Stevie Wonder's willingness to engage with Jimmy's challenge, and both artists' commitment to respectful musical dialogue, created a template for how established artists could approach cross-cultural collaboration as an opportunity for mutual learning rather than competitive appropriation. The evening proved that when musicians approach different traditions with genuine curiosity and respect, the result could be musical magic that transcended any individual cultural limitation, while honoring the traditions that made such transcendence possible. If this incredible story of how a musical challenge became a legendary collaboration that changed how artists approach cross-cultural dialogue moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more amazing tales of artists who used competition to create understanding and respect between different musical traditions. Share this video with someone who believes that the greatest music happens when artists challenge each other to reach higher levels of excellence while maintaining respect for cultural authenticity. And don't forget to check out our other videos about the legendary musical battles that created lasting friendships and artistic innovations.